Putting it very simply, the verb does the work in the sentence. It is the word that expresses action or state of being. Without a verb, you cannot have a sentence. There are three types of verbs: action verbs, linking verbs, and auxiliary or helping verbs. Let's talk about action verbs first. An action verb tells what someone or something does. Here are a couple of examples. Boris bounces the basketball. Here, the verb is bounces. It is the action Boris is performing. The wildebeest ate the grass on the Serengeti plain. Here, the verb is ate. It is the action the wildebeest are performing. Finally, Zeke called Stanley. In this sentence, the verb is called. It is the action Zeke performed. All three of these verbs are what we call transitive verbs. Now that's just a fancy word. That means it's a verb that is followed by another word that answers the questions what or whom. To figure out if a verb is transitive, just substitute one of those questions. If there's an answer, it's a transitive verb. Let's try it. Boris bounces what? The basketball. Must be a transitive verb. The wildebeest ate what? The grass. Must be a transitive verb. Zeke called whom? Stanley. Must be a transitive verb. There's a different type of action verb called an intransitive verb. With one of these verbs, the questions what or whom do not work. Let's look at some examples. Magellan sailed around the globe. Ask yourself what Magellan did. He sailed. Clearly, sailed is the verb. But those two questions, what and whom, don't work here. Magellan sailed what? Doesn't work. Magellan sailed whom? Also doesn't work. The answer to those questions are not in the sentence. Therefore, we have an intransitive verb. Here's another example. The second baseman spun gracefully to get the ball. What did the second baseman do? He spun. There's your verb. He spun what? Doesn't work. He spun whom? Also doesn't work. My verbs must be intransitive because they don't answer the questions what or whom. In these sentences, other questions are answered. Questions like where and how. Now let's look at one that can go both ways. My dog hears the car, and my dog hears well. In the first sentence, we have an answer to one of the two questions. First of all, let's find that verb, hears. My dog hears what? The car. Clearly, this is a transitive verb. Now we have the same verb here in the second sentence. Hears. But if we try to put in one of those two questions, my dog hears what? My dog hears whom? This word doesn't answer that question. Instead, it answers a different question. How does my dog hear? He hears well. Because it doesn't answer one of those two questions, what or whom, this verb, same verb, must be intransitive. So you see, it depends on the context of the sentence whether you have a transitive or an intransitive verb. The second type of verb is called a linking verb. You all know what linking means. Joining, tying together. And that's what a linking verb does. It joins the subject of a sentence to a word that identifies or describes it. Let's look at some examples. Horace is a fireman. Now, first of all, Horace is the subject of our sentence. It's what we're talking about here. The linking verb is ties that noun. The linking verb is ties Horace to that noun on the other side of the verb, fireman. Horace and fireman are joined by the verb is. The word fireman identifies Horace. Let's look at this one. Horace is angry. Here the word angry describes Horace. Again, these two words are tied together by the word is. The word is links Horace to a word that describes him. If you're stumped, try this trick. substitute an equal sign for the word you think is a linking verb. If the meaning stays just about the same, you have found your verb. Let's try it. Horace, fireman. That works. Horace, angry. Looks to me like the meaning is just about the same in these two sentences. These must be linking verbs. The most common linking verb is the be verb in all its forms. Am, is, are, was, were, been, and being. Some other common ones include look, seem, feel, appear, grow, and remain. Let's look at some examples. Horace grew angry. Horace is our subject, grew is our linking verb, and angry is a word that describes Horace. So the word grew links Horace to angry. The king seems stupid. King is your subject. The word seems links the king to an adjective that describes him. The toddler looks hungry. Toddler is the subject of our sentence. Hungry is a word that describes him. And looks is a linking verb that ties these two things together. The last type of verb is called an auxiliary or helping verb. Sometimes you'll have a sentence where you think you found the main verb, but there are a lot of little words in front of it. Those guys are the auxiliary verbs. If you take them out of the sentence, the meaning changes, or the sentence no longer makes sense. Fortunately, these guys are easy to spot. Let's look at some examples. The family is going to Aruba. We recognize going as the main verb, but that word is critical to the sentence. We can't say the family going to Aruba and have a complete sentence. In this case, is an auxiliary verb, but it's a full member of the verb phrase. The lion could have eaten my sister. Eaten is the main verb, but could and have are also critical to the meaning of the sentence. Let's see what happens when we take one of them out. The lion could eaten my sister. Doesn't make sense. The lion have eaten my sister. Doesn't make sense. Take them both out. The lion eaten my sister. None of those make sense. The whole verb phrase is could have eaten, with could and have being auxiliary verbs and eaten being the main verb. But they're all critical to the meaning of the sentence. Usually all the auxiliary verbs are right next to the main verb, but there could be a couple extra words in between them. Let's look at some examples. Lupe has not been home lately. The verb phrase is has been. This word not is an adverb, and it's stuck in the middle of the verb phrase. So if you're asked to identify a verb, always remember that the word not is not a verb. Did Frank feed his boa constrictor? The verb phrase here is did feed. Because this is a question, anytime you have a question, you're often going to have a split verb phrase. If we were to switch this around, we could say Frank did feed his boa constrictor, and then it would be obvious that did feed is my verb. Just because they're split, don't be tricked into thinking that either part can live without the other. Remember, auxiliary verbs come before a clearly identifiable main verb.